this image still has that cut and paste look and feel. And that's because all the layers that I've added here are full opacity, and they don't actually let through any of the reflections that are in the camera in the background here. If I hide these layers for the camera user interface and the model here, we can see that there's a very, very clear reflection of the actual photographer here. So to get rid of that cut and paste look and feel, we actually need to let more of this reflection through in the layers for the model and the camera user interface. So I'll show these additional layers and select the close-up layer here. If we look in the layer panel here, we can see that there are a lot of options available here. For instance, I can actually lower the opacity of this close-up layer, and that will actually let more of the photographer through here, or the camera through here. And as you can see, the reflection of the photographer is actually appearing here. But at the same time, we're lowering the contrast way too much, so it doesn't really look like an image that's displayed on the screen. So just lowering the opacity really doesn't do the trick here. So I'll crank that up again. If we look beside the opacity, we have a menu there, and the state that's selected now is normal. If we click and hold on that menu, we actually see the different options. These are blending modes, so these are different ways to actually blend the current layer with the layers below. If I select multiply here, for instance, the current layer here will actually be multiplied, or the pixel information will be multiplied with the underlying layers, and I get a really dark image here. These blending modes are actually really useful, and feel free to play around with them. They're divided into sections, and all the blending modes under the darken section here will actually end up giving a darker result than the original. And all the blending modes under lighten here will end up giving you a lighter result. The blending modes under overlay here are all contrast increasing blending modes, so all these modes will actually give you higher contrast than you had from the beginning. I'm gonna try to use this blending mode called screen here, which will give me a lighter result to make it look like the image is actually projected on the screen here. And some of the reflection of the photographer will actually start shining through here. I will need to enhance that even more later on here. The camera user interface here looks really pasted on as well. And that's because there's no value variation at all in the camera user interface. It's a flat black surface. I need to blend the camera user interface with the underlying layers as well. And since it's supposed to be a black surface, I could actually try multiply here. If I choose that, you can see that not much happened, but I got some more variation. The shadow parts are slightly darker now than the highlight parts, at least. I could try to play around with the opacity here to enhance the differences even more. But in this case, I'm actually going to add the shadow reflection and the highlight reflection as separate layers here. So I'll use the full opacity for these layers for the time being, at least. To really enhance the shadow and highlight reflections here, I'm going to use image information from the original image here. So I'll hide the close-up and camera user face in layers here, so I can actually see the camera here. So the portion of this image that I really need to enhance the reflection here is basically the active area of the screen here. And I've already made a selection for that area and used it as a layer mask for the close-up image. So I can actually reuse that layer mask and and load it as a selection. So there's actually no need to start from the beginning and create a new selection for the reflection part here. I can simply load the layer mask as a selection. And to load a layer mask as a selection, I hold down the command key on a Mac or control key on a PC and just click on the layer mask. That will actually load the layer mask as a selection. And now you can see the selection edges here in the image. If I hide the layers for the close-up and camera user face and select the background layer, which is the layer I'm going to copy from, I can simply copy that portion of the image through Edit and Copy. I'm thinking that this is the shadow part of the reflection here. And I'll start by selecting layer 1 because that's the layer I'm going to paste this reflection above. And then I'll just go to Edit and choose Paste. At the moment we don't actually see much difference here because we actually pasted a copy of the screen on top of the original screen, and it was placed exactly on top of the original screen. If I toggle the visibility for the other layers though, you can see that something has happened. We don't see the other layers, and that's because we have this copy of the screen on top of them and it's in full opacity. If I hide layer 2, we can actually see the underlying layers again. This copy of the screen here will actually be the basis for my shadow reflection here. And again, I'm going to choose to actually blend this image information with the underlying layers here. So I'll go to the blend modes menu, and in this case I want to raise the contrast here. So I'll try this overlay blend mode, and if that is too strong I can try lowering the opacity or even try soft light, which is a softer version of overlay. And now I've actually enhanced the reflection of the photographer here in the phone screen here. I at least got some more variation where the reflection is supposed to be. I still need a reflection for the highlight portion here on the right side of the screen here. And the shadow reflection actually contains all the information that I need for that highlight reflection, since I copied the actual screen here. So I can reuse that, and I need somehow to duplicate that layer. And there are a couple of ways to do that. And one way is to actually right-click on the layer and just choose Duplicate Layer. Another way would be to pull and drag that layer down to the symbol for New Layer at the bottom of the layer panel here. If I drag and drop there, I'll actually end up with a copy of the layer. And that copy actually inherits all the traits from the original. So I get the same blend mode and so on. I want to change the blend mode here to a lighter blend mode. So I'll try screen to see if that works. And it works fairly well. I even get some of the fingerprints shining through here in the reflection. And I get a lot of variation in the shadows and highlight parts of the reflection here as well. The reflections are still a little too harsh, and to soften the reflections I'll actually just lower the opacity slightly on both the highlight reflection and the shadow reflection here. Right now I have a whole bunch of layers that have these generic names, layer 1, 2 and 3 and so on. I need to start naming these layers so I know which layer is which. And if I hide layer 1 here, I can see that that's the camera user interface. So it would be a good idea to actually rename that camera UI or something. So I'll double click the name and start giving it a name. I call it camera UI. And the same goes for the reflections here. The first reflection layer here was the shadow reflection, so I'll simply rename that shadow reflection. The second layer here, or reflection layer here, was the highlight reflection. So I'll rename that highlight reflection. At the moment I have a whole bunch of layers that I eventually want to treat as a unit or a single image. But before I go on to do that, I need to adjust something that I've created before. If we look at the model image here, I actually moved that around within the mask, and to be able to do that I had to delink the image layer from the layer mask. And I need to relink those so that the layer mask will actually follow the image in the future here. And I do that by clicking between them. And you can see that the link symbol there actually reappears. Looking here at the camera user interface, you can see that that image actually sticks outside of the active area of the screen. So I need to trim that down as well. And I already have this layer mask for the active area of the screen, which I used for the model image here. So I can actually reuse that once again. If I hold down the Control or Command key and click on the layer mask, I'll actually load the layer mask as a selection. And if I select the camera user interface, I can add a layer mask to that layer as well. You do that either through the menu Layer and Layer Mask, or at the bottom of the layer panel you actually have a shortcut for creating a layer mask, and it works whenever you have a free-floating layer and a selection in that layer. So it looks like the quick mask symbol. If you click that, you actually add a layer mask to the active layer.